We are back at it. It is Penn State week, 2 days away from that pretty massive game. I don't know if you guys heard about it. I'm Chris Drew from Menace of Sports, back with my guy Ron from Best Day Media, here to deliver you more Ohio State content on Bleacher Report. Ron, what's good?
It is a great day in Buckeye Nation, man. We are only a few days away from this huge matchup with Penn State that I think the Buckeyes are really prepared for. But, man, we got an early Christmas present today. A scandal at Michigan?
Yeah, scandal at Michigan. And I feel like we could talk for hours about it. All the jokes have been elite from the Ohio State fan base, honestly, from every fan base. People doing deep dives into what other coaches were saying, including the one comment from Greg Schiano about something's not right here, something's going on. And really, obviously, like them, they have their own rivalry week this week. I know that they are heavy favorites over Michigan State, but we know how rivalry games go. So for this to pop up 2 days before they have an enormous game, not an enormous game, a rivalry game, really is something. And it's no longer speculation or message board stuff because the Big Ten's talking about it. All the news outlets are talking about it. It is something that it was not on my bingo board for today.
Absolutely not on my bingo card, and especially for Michigan fans that are so high and mighty at this very moment. Michigan State is down. They have won their last two matchups against Ohio State. They pounded Penn State last year. Like, they are riding high right now, and arguably in some places the favorite to win the Big Ten right now. And for them to have to deal with this scandal as a Buckeye fan, I have to say, has been incredible today.
Yeah, ramifications I could go on and on, but also in the middle of a contract negotiation for Jim Harbaugh as well, getting caught up in this. So, again, just massive news in Big Ten country. But we are here because it's a massive game this weekend. It's big for the obvious reasons. The winner of this game controls their own destiny in terms of winning the conference and honestly controls their own destiny to make it to the playoffs. The loser of this game has to root for basically a three-way tie between Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. And what that does, you kind of go to a tiebreaker. Definitely a massive game for you, Ron. Does this game feel bigger than the Penn State? Not than the Penn State game, than the Notre Dame game?
It does, just because it's further along on the schedule, and it seems like the Buckeyes have even more to lose. And you said control their own destiny. Well, there is one person that could intervene if the Big Ten or NCAA want to get involved in this Michigan scandal. It may shake up the Big Ten race a little bit, but no, I definitely know what you mean here. It is the first big game between the Big Three to decide what most people feel is a three-person race in the Big Ten, and this one is the first one that's going to be the first domino to fall in that puzzle.
Yeah, first domino to fall. Notre Dame's a really good football team. Obviously, like the win over USC kind of strengthens them. The loss against Louisville kind of knocks them down a little bit, but definitely a good football team. And you and I talked about it. That always felt like level one. Now, I think that Notre Dame and Penn State are pretty comparable, at least defensively. But again, the conference opponent means so much. And that's where we're at. So
absolutely. Ryan Day always says that, you know what I mean, the three goals coming into the season are beat the team up north, win the Big Ten, and win the national championship. And step one in those processes are not losing to Notre Dame and getting through the conference cleanly. And we were able to get past Notre Dame, and now this is the first big test in conference now for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, huge test, and it means so much. And obviously, like, Penn State's been impressive. I've called them level 2 to start. Now, I know their strength of schedule is outside the top 100. They've got wins against Iowa, Northwestern, UMass, West Virginia, Illinois, and Delaware. But even with the strength of schedule being accounted for, they have been the top defense in the Power 5 with the opponent-adjusted yards per play. Right now, they're number 1 in the entire nation, and that obviously is opponent-adjusted. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Notre Dame. How surprising of a stat is that?
It is surprising, but it's also reassuring because it seems like if the Buckeyes are going to make a run, they are going to be battle tested when they hit the playoffs this year. A lot of times in the past couple of years, people have talked about leading up to the playoffs. No one's seen a defense like this Georgia defense. And I don't think that we have one of those super dominant defenses in the SEC right now. And I think the Buckeyes might have seen two of the top 5 defenses in the country by the time it's all said and done. And they still have Michigan on the schedule. And we know that they're one of the top defenses in the country. So I think it's great to know that, one, that we have one of the best defenses in the country in our back pocket, but also that this offense with a young quarterback is going to be challenged multiple times before they're expected to compete for a Big Ten championship or a national championship.
Yeah, in this metric, it does, it feels like some of the old SEC matchups, like your LSU, Alabama's, the top 2 defenses in the country. And then you had that disgusting to watch, like 6-3 game way back. It does kind of seem like that. It feels like the Big Ten and the Northern schools right now are simply playing just better defense than everybody else. If you kind of look at the top 5, it's Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Oregon. No other SEC schools other than Alabama. Georgia's not up there. Obviously, we know LSU's got a bad defense this year as well. So just another one of those metrics that makes you kind of think about this game a little bit differently, because obviously in the past, Ohio State has been the team that's really offensive heavy. Now, jumping ahead a little bit, if you look at Penn State, just kind of in a vacuum, they've got the highest point differential through the first 6 games of the year. Now, I've mentioned they've also had a weak strength of schedule, but since 2018 through 6 games, every single team that's led the nation in point differential for just those first 6, they've all made the playoffs. Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, and Ohio State again. And right now, that is Penn State. So statistically speaking, they're really up there with the very best in all of college football.
Absolutely. And I feel like this is going to be a huge test for the Buckeyes in many ways. I mean, the tackles are going to have their hands full with the defensive line. Kyle McCord is going to have his hands full with that secondary, and their corners are no slouch. So the Buckeye receivers, I talk about it's wide receiver U. I mean, they're a little banged up right now. We may see some freshmen play, but I mean, Penn State's defense all around is going to create problems for this Ohio State offense, and definitely challenges that we talked about the corners at Notre Dame, and yes, they're good and maybe even potentially better, but I don't even think it's comparable, the defensive lines. I think the edges at Penn State are that much better than Notre Dame and are going to present a much more difficult challenge for Josh Fryer and Josh Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the defensive ends. They've been really, really good, Ron. We got the numbers here in front of us. Like, they've been the Penn State defensive ends.
The best. Not really good, the best.
Currently, Eddie Isaac, like you see on screen, is the Big Ten leader in sacks. And a lot of people like myself will tell you that he might not even be the best defensive end on the team. Because Chop Robinson, another guy who's also top 10 in the Big Ten, I think is just as good, if not better. So definitely a scary duo. But Isaac in particular, to be able to have the bend on the edge, to be able to kind of win with multiple moves, and to be able to be productive as a sack expert should be the thing that really concerns Ohio State, and is part of the reason why the defense has been so good. Right now, in the entire nation, Penn State is number 2 in turnover margin, and then I believe they're top 10 in sacks. So just they've got that on the defensive line, absolutely.
Agreed. And I've caught myself saying a couple times this week, the only advantage I see for Penn State right now in this matchup, or at least the biggest advantage, is their defensive line. And I was like, I don't think that's enough to get the game won for them. And then I look and rewatch last year's game, and I see JT Tuimoloau with 2 interceptions, a pass breakup that turns into another interception for one of our defensive ends. Tyleik Williams balled out that game. Our defensive line was super disruptive in that game last year and was a huge reason why the Buckeyes were able to come away with a win. And while I want to downplay it as much as possible and act like their defensive line being their biggest strength won't create too many issues for the Buckeyes, when I look at history and what the Buckeyes are able to do, it does worry me a little bit that we saw the defensive line able to win the game for the Buckeyes last year. And I'm worried that that might be the case for Penn State this year. Yeah,
they were. Last year was wild, though. Like, last year felt like an out-of-body experience for JTT. I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum. I mean, being a high school tight end, one of the best tight ends in the country, coming to Ohio State playing, defensive end, kind of taking advantage of a lot of the quick game stuff that Penn State likes to do, and just like played out of his mind to the point where everyone thought he was a first rounder, myself included. And I think he's going to be a good player for a long time in the NFL. Just not quite sure I'll see that performance again. I mean, if you look at some of the all-time great defensive line performances, it's either 1 or 2 with one of those absurd Ndamukong Suh performances before they joined the Big Ten. So, that it's crazy. Like, if they need that kind of performance, if Penn State needs that kind of performance from Chop Robinson to win this game, what do? Tip your cap to him, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't bet my money on it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that wasn't just a regular go crazy game by JTT. Like you said, that's like a generational type game. Like people will forever associate that game against Penn State. JTT could go on to be a Hall of Famer, and people will still remember that performance against Penn State.
Bro, like show notes out the window. I could not believe what I was watching. Like, I could not believe it, bro.
And I just rewatched the game too, and in the beginning of the game, I'm like, really? We had 2 interceptions in like the first quarter and a half, and he wasn't done. And like I was explaining to people the other day, obviously I live in Pennsylvania. I have a ton of friends that are Penn State fans. There's Penn State fans at my house watching the game. And like the whole time I'm stressing, thinking that we're gonna lose, and then the script flips and the Buckeyes take over, and I'm thinking I'm gonna have a bunch of Penn State fans in my house trolling me after the game. And then like I knew how upset I was with the way that game was going. I was like, I can't even troll you. I was like, because I thought we were going to lose. I was like, I'm just going to let you live. And I'm just glad that I made it out of this game.
It feels like Ohio State defensive ends in that game in particular always go crazy. And every time it happens, I think about LJ, Larry Johnson, widely considered in the industry as the GOAT, obviously came from Penn State. It's like, man, I don't know if his guys like feel the grudge match, like his guys know, like we can't play bad against them, but always going crazy. Whether it's, JTT, Sam Hubbard, Chase Young, they all go off.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Larry has something for his old school, because, I mean, you talk to some Penn State fans and they're like, there were some Penn State fans ready for Larry to go when he left. And they're like, the times had passed him by then, and he's now had another Hall of Fame career with the Buckeyes. And I mean, you hear Buckeye fans calling for Larry Johnson's retirement, and he's like, hold my beer, watch what I'm going to do out here. And you see him keep producing these talents. His interior this year has been going crazy. And we have a guy like Tyleik Williams, who was disruptive last year. It got a little bit overshadowed by what JTT was able to do. But that's a person that I expect to go crazy this week.
No, absolutely. I mean, he's been that. And we'll talk about him a little bit later in the show. But I want to get to the reasons why Ohio State will beat Penn State this week. And I want to start with the kid from Ohio, Drew Aller, and this Penn State offense. They average under 4 yards per play. They're still scoring 30 points a game. They don't really throw the deep ball that well. They don't really have the big explosive plays. Will Drew Aller and Penn State and Mike Yurcich struggle to move the ball downfield against Ohio State?
I think so, because I think something that's so important to Penn State's success is their ability to turn the ball over and flip the field position. You talk about their lowest yards per play. We look at the Iowa stats. I'm like, let's go look at the stats against the best defense that they've seen. Drew Aller, 3 touchdowns, 166 yards on like 25 attempts. Mm-hmm. They are going to need long, sustained, methodical drives, and they're not a big play offense. And we've talked on this show plenty of times about how that is the biggest threat to the Jim Knowles defense. You talk about Jim Knowles going to Blitzaholics Anonymous, and is he going to learn from his mistakes of last year? And it seems that he has, and we have not been killed by the big play. And I feel like if they think they're going to be able to sustain 70 and 80-yard drives, I think they're sadly mistaken. And if the Buckeyes are able to get out early, I think this is going to be not a fun watch for Penn State fans. But if the Buckeyes start slow, I think it could be another grinded out type of game like Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, they're a real dink and dunk offense. They don't really, they have almost 0 negative plays, and they're always moving forward. But again, they benefited from a lot of short drives. Like, it's okay to dink and dunk your way for 30 yards or 40 yards because you do, you're second in the country in turnover margin. But how are you going to handle when you are pinned back inside the 10? Can you put together a drive long enough to win a game? And that's where, like, I think that schools like Notre Dame worried me more, because Sam Hartman is so methodical. Sam Hartman is a point guard. That offense was used to being pinned back and kind of had the style offense and style quarterback you want to be able to convert a lot of these third downs to kind of move the chains. But with them, at least, I'm not sure they'll be able to. And I honestly think that, like, that's a case of a Penn State weakness lining up with an Ohio State strength. And that's always kind of what you're looking for. And honestly, like, a lot of those 8 yards, 9 yards, like third and 8, third and 9, our safeties have been so good that I feel like if they are forced to throw the ball on 3rd and medium or 3rd and long, I think those safeties can end up confusing a young quarterback like Drew Aller because of how multiple all these guys are.
Yeah, and you're not going to see our corners sitting off like we used to in the past, like that in the
free yards, the easy access.
Yeah, like it seemed like times like with Kerry Combs and the Matt Barnes era, the Buckeyes were comfortable just giving up, 3 and 4 yards as long as they kept everything in front of them because they were such in fear of the big play. And I don't think that they have that fear on this defense right now of the big plays. And I don't think that rules out the possibility of a big play from Penn State. But I definitely do think that the Buckeyes are equipped to stop them.
I think Mike Yurcich and Drew Aller are going to have to take a deep shot early. Like we saw with Utah when they played Florida. Like just test the jaw early. All the talk has been about how Drew Aller can't push the ball downfield. Well, let's see. And let's see if that kind of throws a wrench in the Ohio State game plan. If not, you could end up leaving your young quarterback out to dry because what happens when all you do is throw short routes the whole game?
Christian, was that you? Was that you calling into Penn State telling James Franklin to just chuck it deep?
Yeah, just chuck it deep. Just chuck it deep. But what happens when all you do is throw short stuff? Corners, they see it. They jump routes. You get pick sixes. And Drew Aller hasn't dealt with the caliber of athlete at corner that Ohio State has this season. Do you want to kind of shift a little bit? Where do you see a major advantage that Ohio State's defense has over Penn State's offense?
Experience.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of these guys that are playing in this game played last year. While I know they have their running backs back, I think this defense experience together and their ability to gel. I saw a lot. One of Penn State's best drives last year was when they went quick tempo. And I saw a lot of guys that no longer play for the Buckeyes for either they departed and went to play for other schools or they went undrafted in the NFL, missing tackles and confused where they should be on that defense. And I feel like when teams go tempo, you see a lot less confusion from this defense, having been in Jim Knowles' system for 2 years, having guys like Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers out there. Jim Knowles talks about having 2 linebackers on the field that know the defense and are able to call the defense because they communicate it not only to the front, but also the secondary. So I think the communication and comfortability in Jim Knowles' system will help this defense a ton. And I feel like if Penn State were to go tempo, I feel like they'll have less success than they did last year because this team is much more comfortable in this defense. And even last year, them in their first year in that offense, there's so many times we saw guys with their arms out, looking around, confused, not sure where to line up. And you just don't see that as often with the Buckeyes this year. And I think their experience is going to play a key role for the defense this year.
No, it's massive. It is an experienced group and a group that I think is filled with a lot of NFL players. One of the NFL players I want to focus on, Tyleik Williams, had a great start to the season, dog. Great start. Disrupted defensive tackle. So good. This is from our guy Terry over there at Buckeye Stop. Man.
Our guy Terry from College Football Stop put together these stats, and you look at Tyleik Williams through 6 games versus Jalen Carter in the 2022 season, and man, these stats look crazy. When I first saw these on the timeline, I couldn't believe it because the hype that Jalen Carter had at this point in the season last year was out of this world. I mean, before the combines and the workouts, people were talking about him potentially being the number 1 pick in the draft. Before
he was top 3 on everybody's big board.
Exactly. So before those workouts, I mean, we're talking about a top prospect, and Tyleik Williams is putting up similar numbers to him already through 6 games. Were you surprised when you saw these stats? Because while I knew Tyleik was balling, it didn't feel like he was going as crazy as the media made it seem that Jalen Carter was going last year. So do you think this is just a matter of the media not paying attention to what the interior of the Buckeyes are doing?
I think Tyleik Williams is a legitimate top 15 pick. Like we just compared his first 6 games to Jalen Carter's entire year. And when I first saw it, I thought it was both 6 and 6. That's how good Tyleik has been. Tyleik is not getting the media buzz, but some of the sources, some of the draft analysts are starting to kind of take notice. He's been the best defensive tackle in the Big Ten this year, and that says a lot because All-American Johnny Newton, who was an All-American last year over there at Illinois, I thought he was going to be the first guy off the board. He has been so good, so disruptive. As someone who watches kind of a little bit from a different view, I felt like he's been in the backfield a lot. But he hasn't been really getting the buzz because whenever anybody talks about the Ohio State defensive line, it's been about lack of sacks. Cool, whatever. Guess what? One of the top 3 defenses in America, and in large part because teams can't get their 3 and 4 yards on first down because he's doing such a good job. I thought this year that Michael Hall would be the best defensive tackle on Ohio State. I was wrong. Tyleek's a freak. He's big. He's moving guys. And I will say this, the interior of the Penn State offensive line has been a little soft this year. I know they're getting a guard back, but they're just getting a guard back. And your first assignment is, hey, number 91, 300 pounds, can run, can move, really strong. Yeah, this is your first assignment back. Yeah, good luck knocking the rust off against him.
Not just 300 pounds, 315, and he has one of the fastest first 10-yard splits in the 40 for all of Ohio State players. So think about that, the get off of a 315-pound guy with the elite athletes at Ohio State, and he's one of the top first 10 yards with the way that he moves. He's an absolute freak of nature. And you talk about the interior of Penn State's offensive line. I do feel like that is a weakness for them. And you talk about strengths on weaknesses. And I think that's another advantage for the Buckeyes. I've talked to a lot of Penn State fans and they say, oh, well, if our running game gets going, I'm like, one of the reasons why you see our defensive ends on the field that people are complaining about not getting sacks is because they have been so good in the run game. JTT, Jack Sawyer have both been good in the run game, and that's why they've been able to stay on the field. I mean, we saw both of those guys play every snap in the Notre Dame game, despite having guys behind them like Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry, who we've both said are capable ends to get in the game. And then our interior guys matching up against their interior offensive line. I think Tyleek and Mike Hall are going to be a handful. And my biggest worry, you brought up third down with Drew Aller. Can they sustain these long drives if they're behind the sticks early on downs? I don't know how much Penn State can expect from Drew Aller on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, 3 and 4 times on a drive if they're being asked to drive 70 and 80 yards consistently this game.
Tyleek Williams is going to be one of the reasons Ohio State wins this game. If you're forced in multiple 3rd and longs on the same drive, he's going to get home for one. Ron, I thought the Ohio State GPS system was broken this offseason. He clocked into practice at 18 miles per hour, over 18 miles per hour. That's absurd. that is an absurd number for someone that weighs 315 pounds. Hey, I want to keep it moving. Freshman coming out party potentially. Ohio State does have some injuries. There's a little bit worry about some guys that may or may not be available for this game. Henderson, Travian Henderson, Chip Trainum. Those are the 2 running backs. The belief is that they will both play. If they don't play, how you feeling about this running back room?
You know me.
Yeah.
Every week I get on Bleacher Report. I get on YouTube. Anywhere they let me get a microphone, and I say the phrase, pay Tony Alford. And he showed again why I say that every week this past Saturday when you saw Dallin Hayden, RB4, come in and show that he's more than a capable back, so much so that Ohio State's running back room is so deep that anytime they play a running back that isn't a starter, half the fan base is screaming that person should be the starter. Right. We've seen it. We have our loyalist to Trey. We see the people screaming that Mayan should be the starter. We have the people from Akron screaming for the guy Chip. Now we have the Dallin supporters. If Evan Pryor gets going, you're going to have this fan base split into 5 about who should be the starting running back. Exactly. So all I got to say is pay my man Tony Alford, and I think regardless of who's hurt on Saturday, he will have a capable back ready to tote the rock and keep Kyle clean in the backfield.
And now for the other ones. The rumor is, the belief is, some grumblings that Emeka and Denzel Burke will not play. Well, Ohio State happens to have some pretty good freshmen that feel like they're in line for a coming out party on a game that should be in prime time, but noon kickoff at the Shoe. For those of you who don't know, if Denzel Burke is out, have no fear. Ron's guy looks like might be here.
If this is the Jermaine Matthews coming out party, the nation is going to be introduced to who I believe is the best freshman cornerback in the country. I started dipping my toe in the water in media last year with highlight films and things like that, and I watched more cornerback tape on high school recruits last year than I ever cared to watch because I made so many highlight tapes last year. And I kept every time I would watch a new cornerback's tape, I would text the group chat and say, Jermaine Matthews is the best corner in the country. I've watched darn near every corner in the country, and there's no one better than this kid. His film looks like wide receiver film. He takes every interception back to the house. He's played in, 3 games so far and already has a pick 6 in his career, 6 games into his true freshman year. He was graded before last week as PFF's #1 corner in the country as a true freshman. We haven't seen much of him, and you hate to see injuries go down. I think Denzel, despite how much I believe in Jermaine, I do think Denzel is the best corner on this team, but I have a hard time believing there's going to be much of a drop-off because I believe in this kid so much. A Cincinnati kid. We've done countless shows on Buckeye BS and the Buckeye Roast talking about how crucial the state of Ohio and in-state recruiting is going to play in the return of BIA, the best in America. That used to be the moniker for Ohio State secondary, and we've regressed a little bit the past couple of years, but I'll have you know, with Denzel Burke, David Igbinosa, Jermaine Matthews, the safeties that we're seeing in the secondary, Proctor, Lathan Ransom, Jordan Hancock, BIA is back, and we are in good hands because the cornerback recruiting is just going to keep flowing with guys like Bryce West, Aaron Scott, more kids from Ohio. While I think that we have injuries, and those are a concern, if there are 2 rooms that I think the Buckeyes can survive injuries in, it's absolutely wide receiver and corner, and that's a big shout-out to Tim Walton and Brian Hartline for how prepared they have their rooms and how talented their rooms are, that they could lose a guy that Denzel Burke, potential day 1 pick, and we're like, wait till you see this freshman.
Well, you know what it reminds me of, and I hate to do this because I don't want to put unrealistic expectations on kids, but Ohio State, I think he's a great one. I think he's a really special one, and I'll never forget when I found out that Denzel Ward was going to sit the bowl game and Jeff Okudah was going to get his first start, stood up. I'm like, oh, yeah, we're going to get to see it. Now, I don't know if Jermaine Matthews will start. We still don't know the situation fully. Obviously, with the injury stuff, Ohio State's pretty tight-lipped. But I have that kind of feel about him. Like when Marshawn Lattimore was the full-time corner and Denzel Ward took over for him, it's like no drop-off. We're going to continue it. And the fact that he's an Ohio corner is big. Now, Emeka, him being out of the game would be pretty big. I mean, he's a guy that's also considered a first-round draft pick. XJ's there. But last week, we saw the 2 freshman receivers going absolutely crazy. If Emeka is out, who would you like to see get the lion's share of the touches? And do you think either of these 2 kids are good enough to kind of put the nation on notice, during this game that is a top 10 matchup?
This show is titled Why Ohio State Will Beat Penn State, but this should be called the Ron James Layup Special because I am here for all the South Florida Express propaganda that I could possibly push, and I am here to see my guys, Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss. They played for one of the most elite 7-on-7 programs in the country, and I knew coming in that these guys would be ballers. We heard about Carnell Tate the second that he stepped on campus. We heard things of the sort of that he at this point in his career is better than Marv was entering his sophomore year. Brandon Inniss, who was his teammate in 7-on-7 and ranked higher than him coming into the country, or coming in to Ohio State this year, didn't arrive until summer, so we weren't sure how much of an impact he was going to be able to make. And then we see him out there catching touchdowns from Devin Brown last week in the 4th quarter. The reason why I'm so confident in these 2 guys is despite their lack of playing time so far this year, we've seen Carnell get in a good bit. Brandon Inniss has started to come on as of recently, but I believe despite Emeka being super talented, I don't think anyone on this team creates more separation than these 2 guys, Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss. Their releases out of breaks are so ridiculous, and I feel like that's needed for the struggles that we've seen. In the last week, we saw Kyle able to really press the ball, and we saw him throw into some really tight windows and made some really impressive throws last week. But I think if either one of these guys get on the field, we saw Carnell Tate streaking down the field wide open, caught a pass from Kyle McCord. We saw Brandon Inniss do the same thing and catch one from Devin Brown. I think both of these guys will add a much-needed boost to this room as far as separation if they do get an opportunity this week.
Before we get out of here, I want to talk Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord this season, obviously, the start was not as pretty as Ohio State fans would want. Ryan Day said in his most recent press conference, the Kyle McCord is developing at the same pace as other first-year starting quarterbacks he's coached, Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields, and C.J. Stroud, all of which never lost to Penn State. Now, these last 2 games, we've seen Kyle McCord really pick it up, have a passer rating of over 100 both games after kind of getting off to, a little bit of a slower start. Is Penn State catching Ohio State at the worst time, given the growth we've seen from Kyle McCord?
Absolutely. And I feel like some of these teams might catch Ohio State early in the season with this new scheduling that we may see as the Big Ten expands. And I feel like Penn State is getting punished because I feel like Penn State came out this season looking like a better team through the first 4 games of the season, and Buckeye fans are getting a lot more confident with they're seeing out of their team, whereas Penn State fans are a little bit more reserved because they've seen their offense struggle in the past few weeks, where I feel like Penn State fans have questions about what to expect from Drew Aller, especially with his lack of accuracy on the deep ball as of late. And Buckeye fans are getting more and more confident with Kyle, seeing him make more NFL throws, him being more consistent and limiting turnovers. So I do think that Kyle McCord is prime for a good game here, and I do think that Drew Aller could potentially struggle this week.
Kyle McCord feels like he's really progressing, man. I mean, if you look at his last 2 games, 600 yards, 5 passing touchdowns, 0 picks, and his average depth per target is up above 10, which is kind of what you want. And then the passer rating up above 120. Ron, feel good about this week. You got a final score prediction?
I do. 35-17. 17's been the number that we've talked about a ton on this show here on Bleacher Report about we don't think this Ohio State defense is going to give up more than 17 points to a lot of teams. I stretched that out to 24 against Maryland because I thought they would really challenge them. They only got 17. So I'm going to stick with that number 17, and I think that is going to be the number that the Buckeyes are able to keep Penn State out of, and I am expecting a coming out party for Kyle McCord. This is going to be the game where he comes out and balls out. I said on our other shows that 3 touchdowns is my bold prediction for Kyle McCord. I think this is where he makes the national media put respect on his name and people start respecting the Buckeyes after this performance.
I got 20-17. I think it's a nail biter, and I do think we see Devin Brown out there for the red zone package. Not ready to say what he'll do with it, but I think we'll see him out there again. I'm Chris Drew from Menace to Sports. That's my guy Ron from Best Damn Media. Again, on the Bleacher Report, giving more Buckeye content. Where can the people find you, Ron?
They can find me on the Best Damn Media YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at 2Ts. It's 2_TEES. We will be back on Saturday immediately after the game for an instant reaction for Ohio State, Penn State. So if you like what you saw today, make sure that you are tapped in on the Ohio State team stream and check us out after the game. How about you?
Honestly,
Chris?
you can find me anywhere Ron is, but I also do my own daily show on Menace to Sports every day at noon. Come by and hang out. But I better see everybody post game. That's the big one. Post game.
Win or lose, I need to see you guys in here. Make sure you tap in. We appreciate Bleacher Report for the opportunity and can't wait to see you guys on Saturday. Go Bucks and OH.
IO.